All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Great to have you. Welcome to the #1 show on innovative teamwork. To my regular listeners, here we go again. Another gem. We're here to just give you lessons upon lessons upon lessons. It's what we do here. It's what you guys have become accustomed to. Today, I have a guy named Lawrence Dunning, who, again, I met through Podmatch. Shout out to Podmatch. He has his own podcast as well, has done some just major things in the real estate world. And in regards to just the fitness, there's a lot of synergy, a lot of crossover in terms of what we do. And, with all that, here's where I want to start. Look, actually, let me just kind of introduce you. Kind of introduce yourself to the show, and then we'll get things started.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Aslan. And I'm really excited to be here. And I think you and I have a lot of synergy, a lot of mutual passion. So it's going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, we do, because and one of the things, as I was getting ready for this, I listened to a lot of your shows. You grew up in England, and your father made you a reader, right? I think the term was you didn't even have
Yes.
a TV until later on in life. And my father was very much the similar way in which he made me actually read to him. And one of your passions now with, all your all the things that you've done real estate wise, all the things that you've done, in jiu-jitsu and all that, one of the things that I heard you said you make time for is being a dad. So I think the best way to kind of start off is talk a little bit about your upbringing, how you came up, and what attracted you, first of all, to do real estate and all that kind of stuff. So I'll give you the mic for a second to kind of talk about how you came up and some of the things that were instilled in you as you grew up to be so productive.
Well, I appreciate that you're perceptive enough to start at the beginning because so much of our character is developed when we're young. And
Yeah.
I actually put a post up today on Instagram of my dad. He's 75 and he's hanging off some mountain in the Alps rock climbing. And I'm just like, man, like I realized like I always wish when I was young, as when I wish he had sat me down and explained certain things to me. But his way was, I'm not going to tell you, I'm just going to live life and you're going to learn from that. So I think that was a really, really cool blessing that I had. But one thing I feel like when I was young, he instilled in me the fact that if you work and make money, that's great. But if you work, make money, and invest it, and buy something straight away, then that's even better. So he had me investing in the stock market when I was 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old. I started working, helping around the house. I had side jobs in the local town when I was young. So he had me invest that money and just have that kind of relationship with money, the delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so as I got older, I had a background in finance. I was working in finance, and then I was looking for ways to. One thing I've realized, and this was a very painful lesson, and some of your listeners might know this, some might not. It's two very different skills to make money and then to keep money. They're two very. Some people confuse them and think it's just one, but it's two very different skills. And real estate is a great way to maintain and grow wealth safely.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I found my way to real estate. I made a lot of mistakes when I was young. I made a lot of money in finance, but I didn't invest it wisely, and I blew through it. I made all the mistakes you could make as a young man. But and one more thing I'll just say is
Yeah, go ahead.
that reading is so difficult today. We're also distracted, myself included, with cell phones and technology in our pocket, and there's so many distractions. But I really do think, and now I have a 3.5-year-old, and I'm already seeing him reading books, and I'm reading with him, and it's
Right.
just such a good habit is to go deep in certain things. So when you're getting those quick, 1 minute videos, 30-second clips, you're getting information, but you're not really going deep anywhere. And I
Right.
think it's so important with in today's world that's so everything's competing. We're an attention economy. Everyone's competing for our attention. Is just to put the technology aside and just read old school books like an hour at a time. I think it's so good for your brain, especially young people. There's so many distractions. It's good to really slow down and go deep. So I'm so grateful that I had parents that had that focus when I was young, and I think it's a great habit that it's not easy, but I'm trying to keep that now the rest of my life.
Yeah, and you kind of brought up something that I think is very, very important for not only just the current listeners, but everyone out there that has this issue. And it's all about money mindset. All right. And there's
Mm.
so many people who have a very poor money mindset. And even you kind of started to admit to a little bit making mistakes. Can you kind of speak on, because you were someone that, again, you said your dad had you in finance and he taught you investing, not much like my father. He ran his own business. He did his own taxes. He just made me aware of how to sort of take control of your finances. But even like you, I still made some mistakes, plenty of mistakes, went bankrupt, lost everything, got a car repossessed, the whole thing. Can you speak on a little bit of the tactics that you you teach people to get them out of their poor money mindset where like you said, spending money on something is not the same as saving it and investing it and seeing profits grow and things of that nature?
Oh, well, I'll give you a great example. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's some statistic. The average multimillionaire has 7 different sources of income. And the mistake that
I
I
have heard that. Yep,
made,
I've heard that.
yeah, yeah. And the mistake that I made is I had one source of income, which was trading, and it was incredibly profitable. I made all this money on the trading floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize that, that was great in that time and place. But then
Mm-hmm.
the high frequency trading came in, and that business model no longer existed. So I took a little break. I was following some sporting passions and just following some dreams. And in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, I was thinking, I'm going to go back on the trading floor when I'm done and keep making all this money. And I didn't realize that when I was gone, that whole business no longer existed. So I had
Right.
to completely find a new thing. So I love just telling people, I'll give you one easy revenue stream, and that's real
Mm-hmm.
estate. Because most people, if you're paying taxes and you can just get one investment property, it's going to be, even if it doesn't make money, if it just breaks even, you're going to get, and it doesn't appreciate. So obviously it probably will over time appreciate, and hopefully it has some type of cash flow, but it's going to be a second source of revenue. And that's our goal as we get older, is to try to diversify so we have different sources of income, so that when things happen that we can't predict, because no one can predict the future, we're going to be okay. And I think you and I are living through this crazy time where who
Mm-hmm.
knows how many careers and jobs are going to get lost through artificial intelligence, for instance. It's just that
Exactly.
technology makes things move at a pace that's so rapid that we have to be willing to always pivot and adapt. So trying to get ahead of it and just trying to get that financial education to try and diversify your income a little bit, I think it's a really smart move.
Okay, so let's dive into a little bit of your story, because one of the things that I've been on record saying for a lot of times is how working out and maintaining a level of fitness, in particular, combat sports fighting, because we're in business and we know it's a fight club. It's a fight. You're going against other business owners every single day. And you kind of already mentioned it, that you were you were trading, but then you chose to take a sabbatical to do jujitsu, to compete and, become a black belt and stuff like that. Talk a little bit about how that training has actually helped you as a businessman, helped you come back and say, okay, I know it's not what it used to be, but there's certain things I've done through my training that's allowing me to profit as a businessman, allowing me to get through the tough times, allowing me to maybe make those calls, make those sales, deal with the rejection, all that stuff. I'd love to hear how you were able to use that to help you in business.
Well, you kind of touched on some of those things. I've
Mm-hmm.
had 3 different careers, right? I was in
Yeah.
finance, then I was in trading, then I was fighting professionally at MMA, and then I'm in real estate now. And of those 3 careers, completely separate, there's certain themes that I think come across all of them. And you mentioned a couple of them. I mean, the ability to, they say in boxing, you're not going to get through a boxing fight without getting hit, or an MMA fight, but you can't let that deter you. And it's the same with business, with say you're working in real estate, or say you're investing in stocks. You're going to make a couple of bad calls, you're going to lose money, but that's just part of the game. And there
Mm-hmm.
was a wonderful mentor when I first got into trading, very, very wealthy guy. And he said to me, he said, if you're trading and 60% of your trades make money and 40% of your trades lose money, at the end of the year, your profit is going to be the difference, the 20% difference. But if you let the 40% of losses get you down emotionally, get you in a bad place, make you lose your trading strategy, you're lost. So you really have to have a good mindset. And I think mindset is so important in business. Well, you need the combination of the mindset plus the technical skills. You can't just have one or the other. And I think just being a scrappy person and fighting and having that fighter's mentality. I love the fact you mentioned that, because when I was trading, you're literally physically in the pit sometimes, fighting to get an extra broker to get on a good trade with a lot of money. It's the weirdest work environment. It's white collar pay, blue collar work, they say. But it's the idea of you're fighting for, and the same in real estate. Real estate is so tough right now. Rates are high. You're fighting for business. Like there's so much competition. So that idea of just trying to be scrappy and be a fighter and be resilient and not let short-term losses get you down. I think there are lessons in almost every industry that you can have that same kind of mindset.
No, you mentioned something that I'd love for you to dive deeper on, though. You said stick to your strategy when it comes to trading and real estate. And you'll be able to educate me on this a little bit, is how do you develop a strategy in that? It seems like a business that is so, it goes up and down, and you try to keep up with the trends. How do you even develop, all right, this is the strategy, this is what's going to work, and then if it loses money, like you said, I'm going to stick to that strategy when you don't know if the money's going to come in. How do you where do you
Yes.
start there?
Well, let's look at something the last
Yeah.
few years that's probably been the most volatile thing around is Bitcoin. So Bitcoin
Yeah,
had
yeah,
that crazy run a couple of years ago, went
right.
all the way to 66,000, then it went down to 15,000, then it made new highs. Now it's back down a bit. So it's had this crazy roller coaster. But if you had a strong mindset and you believe in the story of decentralized currency, you'll be dollar cost averaging in as it goes up, and then when it goes down, you're not gonna, like, I had a friend who was buying the high and then it went down 30% and he got scared and he sold the low. He's doing
Yeah.
exactly the opposite of what you do if you had a strategy where you say, I'm a long-term investor, and if it goes down, it's just a better price for me to dollar cost average in. So that's an example of something where the strategy would be, am I a trader where I'm trying to trade this thing day to day, or am I an investor? Most people are investors, but they get confused and think they're traders. So there's times where you can try and make the quick money, but the way to make real wealth is to have a longer term time horizon and be an investor, not a trader. And that can be in real estate, it can be in stocks, it can be in crypto, it can be in anything. But you have to have the fundamental knowledge too. You can't be trying to invest in a meme coin that's going to go to zero. It's because it doesn't have any utility. So you have to, that's what I was saying about kind of, you have to merge the technical aspect of knowing that what you're investing in is real and it has some long-term utility, and then having the mindset to have a strategy and stick to that strategy. So for instance, I have a friend who, his strategy is to invest in very risky tech stocks. And every time they have a good run, he just takes some money off the table and he buys very stable growth stocks that pay a dividend. So he's kind of playing the volatility of technology. And every time he makes profit, he takes that and he puts in something that's very, very stable. That's his, and he sticks to it so disciplinedly. And he's done really well the last few years. So he's
That's
just
awesome.
sticking to that strategy. Kind of,
Right.
again, the opposite of my friend who gets emotional and he buys the highs because everyone's talking about it. And then when it
Right.
goes down, he panics and he sells he's,
Right.
that's the
Right.
opposite of what you want to be doing.
Right. So when does the human element play into this? Because I've heard Warren Buffett say this on multiple occasions. He debunks this idea that he's some genius. He really does. He says, look, the stuff I don't know, I stay away from those. But the stuff I invest in is the stuff I actually know. So let's say there's someone listening in that has ambitions of being an investor, and they want to get into it, but sometimes again they may not have the background like you had with the finance where they know what questions to ask. Where do you advise them to start in terms of, all right, maybe start with something something you're passionate about? If you lose money on passion, how do you kind of point them in the right direction?
So there's a couple of the Peter Lynch is one. There's a few great investors that talk about this idea of, if if you use something then and you invest in it, you're probably going to do very well. And if you look at Warren Buffett's portfolio, it tends to be very blue chip stocks that people have heard of, things like Coca-Cola and these big companies. But if I looked at myself the last 15 years and I say, what have I been using consistently? Well, I like Apple products. I get Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
I fly Southwest. I use Amazon. If you invested in those companies, you do so well. You have done so well. So I
Mm-hmm.
think just having a common sense aspect to investing,
Oh.
not trying to be too smart and not trying to say something's gone up 25 times and I'm going to try to jump on the wave, but it's wildly overvalued now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's you can make money. That's called momentum trading. You can make money doing that. And in tech stocks, you tend to be always buying the high and it keeps making new highs. But
Mm-hmm.
for people that aren't experienced, I think just sticking to things that they know and use, I think is a pretty good strategy. But I'll say this with trading. There was
Yeah.
an old trading saying. They said when you first start trading stocks, you're going to lose money, and that's going to be the tuition fees of being a good trader. So definitely, if you're, again, make the distinction between trading and investing. And if you're investing, you have to give yourself time for it to work. So for instance, you can't invest money that you need in 3 months, because then you're going to be forced to sell wherever the stock is going to be in 3 months, and it might be down a bit on the way to going up and making new highs. So you have to be very, very strict. I think a great way to trade, and I know Coinbase does this with crypto, and I'm sure a bunch of stock trading companies do this too, where you can say, I'm going to buy $200 of Bitcoin a month,
Mm-hmm.
every month on a Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And I just said it, I don't even think about it. So you're just taking X amount of money. You say, I make this much money every month. I'm going to apportion 10% to invest over the long term. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to set one of these automated systems. So it doesn't matter where the price is, because I believe in it long term. I'm just going to dollar cost average in whether it's going up or going down. And that's a really, for new people, setting aside a small portion of their wealth and doing that, making it automated, I think is really is really good. And it's the same. That's one of the benefits of real estate investing too, is when you buy something that's an investment property and you have a tenant in there or multiple tenants, every month you're paying down you're paying your mortgage. And
Hmm.
part of that mortgage is interest, but part is principal. So by paying down the principal every month, that's a way of like a forced savings account that you don't
Yeah.
even realize, but your tenants are paying it down. So I
Hmm.
think that's the key is people have human emotion
Yeah.
and our brains didn't evolve to be savvy investors. So
Yeah.
we have to you have to decide on a strategy and then stick to it regardless of human emotion, because human emotion is going to probably be like my friend where you're buying the highs and selling the lows because you're getting caught up in emotion.
Yeah, well, that's actually already beat me to it. That was actually what I was going to ask you next. Is everything you're talking, it makes sense, but it kind of goes against the way we're normally taught. We're normally taught, all right, go
Yes.
to school, get a job, get a decent salary, get your 401k. How do you stay so consistent? How are you able to stay so grounded and sort of explain this? I mean, I know you're raising a family now, but obviously these things didn't happen overnight. I could only imagine you maybe running into somebody trying to explain what you do right after you were done, with your jiu-jitsu, and they're like, "What is it he does?" I mean, I could see how that can be very confusing to people. What would you say is attributing to your ability to stay afloat when you kind of are in a high risk business?
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're young, you have to keep your monthly living expenses low. And the biggest mistake that I see
Very
people
true.
make,
Yeah.
the way that I made all my wealth when I was in my 20s is I I got my first bonus to the trading company and I used it as a down payment on a one-bedroom condo downtown Chicago. And then I stayed in that condo for 10 years. And so the whole time as I'm making money, it was just going up in my trading account. I made some investments in real estate and my lifestyle didn't increase. And I think the problem people have is as their wealth goes up, their lifestyle gets fancier and fancier, and they buy things that they don't need to impress people that don't matter in the big scheme of life. And
Mm-hmm.
then as soon as they have a bit of a pullback in their fortunes, suddenly they're in trouble. So I think the best advice is really think about. I see this a lot, and I give this advice a lot to people. Is be careful who you're investing time and money in. Who are you trying to impress? When all is said and done, every study from every person at the end of the life says the same thing. We always think we wish we'd cared less about what people thought of us. We wish we'd follow our dreams more. We
Yeah,
wish we'd spent
exactly.
more time and energy with family and friends, right? Close friends.
Exactly.
Nothing
Exactly.
else matters. So yeah, don't be that person who's living above their means and leasing a car they can't afford and trying to buy a place they can't afford or rent a really fancy place to look great when they
Mhm.
don't need it, and then they get themselves in financial difficulty because that's the difference between someone who has a steady paycheck where it's a very stable job they might have for 10 years
Mhm.
and they know exactly what they're going to be making, next summer. Whereas for me, I've been an entrepreneur since I'm 24. I've had great years and I've had bad years. And in trading, that's a weird job where you can work all year and you can actually have a negative year, which is crazy. I only had that once, but I remember thinking,
Well,
man,
you said
I
it,
could have,
blue collar, man. Some blue collar work.
yes, it's, but as one, I remember thinking I could
Yeah.
have gone to Australia, sat on the beach, and just relaxed all year, and I would have been better off financially than being stressed trading all year and having a negative year. It's such a weird thing to comprehend. But if you're an entrepreneur, I think you've got to have some safety nets in place, and you've got to be willing to be like, hey, I can pay for my living expenses for 6 to 12 months because
Mhm.
things can go bad. And I know you've had some misfortunes too.
Yeah.
I think in business, I have too. Trust me, I've got a lot of successes and I've had some failures too. And I
Yeah.
think the best advice, one thing I always, this is just in life, this is not
Mhm.
just in business, but it's in health, it's in romantic relationships, it's in
Yeah.
friendships. That we have good times and we have bad times. And
Mhm.
one of the saddest things for me is arrogance and hubris, because that's when someone's at the top of whatever success they're so proud of. But the world unfortunately is cyclical and people do fall on tough times. So I think
Mhm.
when you're doing really well, you should be putting some money aside. You should be being a little humble. You should be thinking the role of luck and fate because things are great, because it's not always going to be great. And that's one lesson that I've learned the hard way.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that because as listeners who you may be doing well or you may have something happen, understand when you decided to put that money in a condo that you ended up living in for 10 years, that becomes your asset. I tell people all the
Yes.
time, listeners are probably tired of hearing me talk about this book, but Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, where he explains put your money into assets that are making you money, something that's making you money. And even though you may have had those rough years, the money that you could have spent on a Ferrari went to a condo, and it's actually going to be, you're going to be fine. It's all going to go back to discipline, 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 discipline. Did I say discipline enough? You've got to be very disciplined in regards to what you do when you are, quote unquote, have the bag or whatever it is you have, because it's not going to be every day. So as former athletes, I think it's very important that you young athletes learn that, because again, say it all the time, 1% of you are going to play pro. One. All right. The other 99% of you are not going to make money through whatever athletic endeavors you have. And it's important that you develop this mindset. So, you know, when it comes to what you do, I want to make sure we dive a little bit into your intellectual property as well. When did your books come? Like, when did the idea start hitting you to put out a book and help people, and, you know, put out a podcast and all that kind of stuff?
You know, the podcast came from 2020 when the world shut down,
Yes, so did this, by the way.
Yeah, I love it. I get so much out of podcasts, and it was just a case of, I have a very unique circle and like friends of friends, where it's a mixture of entrepreneurs and athletes and very successful people in different ways of life. And I just wanted to have those conversations. And I did it selfishly for me. And as soon as you start getting positive feedback, when you get these really nice messages from people, and that's really kept me going. But I just published a book on real estate investing a couple of months ago. And the reason I wrote it is because people would say to me all the time, do you have a book? I want to learn about investing in real estate. Is there a good book? And there just wasn't one. There's many books that talked about investing and they touched on real estate, but there wasn't one succinct kind of great, like kind
actually,
of a short, nice, succinct read.
Not to cut you off, but you know, that's kind of where, so I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, The Rich Dad Poor Dad, but he really did, I mean, he touched on real estate a little bit, only because it was a way of putting his lesson out there, and then he has little classes and stuff like that. But you're right, when you think about it, I don't know if it's real estate, just real estate, versus, you know, other stuff that they're putting out there. So I didn't mean to cut, but go ahead. Good. By the way, that happens.
No,
When people start making some noise, I get too excited. I gotta make sure I pause for the listeners, man. So go ahead.
No, you have really great energy. So no, that's the reason, really, is like you said, and by the way, Rich Dad Poor Dad, I'm pretty sure among almost all entrepreneurs, that's probably the most cited book to inspire them to kind of, you know, live a life by their own means, and take the right risks, and kind of have that entrepreneurial life. And
well, we both had dads in our lives that were there. So just the name in itself, it's like, man, that's Kiyosaki, you hitting something, brother. You are hitting some real triggers right now, man. He was talking some good stuff in there.
Exactly. But also as well, the other thing I talk about in the book is that the world we live in. I mean, we've talked about inflation. I mean, we see inflation a lot in the headlines the last 18 months. But I mean, the last 50 years since Nixon came off the gold standard, the purchasing power of the dollar has been going down. So a lot of people, like, my heart goes out to those people where maybe people are struggling to raise a family, and between a husband and wife, they have 3 or 4 jobs between them, part-time jobs, and they're just struggling to pay the bills. If they don't have assets, you know, the grocery bills are going to keep going up. The rent is going to keep going up. Life is going to keep getting more expensive. But all these politicians that have, you know, people like Nancy Pelosi, she has 100 million in 2021, and that portfolio is now worth 200 million, because they're real assets that they're growing, whether it's real estate, whether it's equities, you know, these people. So it's just trying to spread the message that a lot of people making decisions, and this isn't about left and right, it's about just people in power. They have this knowledge and they have these assets that have gone up the last few years and done really well. And a lot of people who maybe they're just starting out from school, and they're young in their careers, they don't have any assets yet. They are struggling right now. So just trying to spread that message. You know, you can have absolutely nothing and you have a job where you're barely surviving. Listen, make some sacrifices and put 10% in Bitcoin or something, or stocks. Like, I know you can't afford to buy a building yet, you know, but just put something away in some kind of asset that you're going to be very grateful for down the road. So it's just trying to spread that knowledge of, like you said, with Rich Dad Poor Dad, I think is great because it talks about that. It talks about putting money in things that appreciate versus money in things that depreciate, and just trying to have that, trying to not be the man by living above your means to try and impress people that don't even matter, and try and put a bit of sacrifice today so that your future self will be really grateful. And I think that's such a good message. And especially even like you talk about the tiny percentage that can become pro athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Even among pro athletes that make all this money, how common is that story? Like they made all this money in their career and then they end up broke. It's because there's, like we talked about, there's two different skills between making money. Obviously, they can make money, but they don't know how to invest it properly and keep it. So I think just spreading the knowledge of financial literacy is such a powerful thing. And I wanted to just shout it from the rooftops because I don't think money can solve all your problems, but it'll solve your monetary problems, and that'll enable you, in my opinion, to live a great life if you use money wisely.
Can you kind of clearly, for our listeners, clearly define what an asset is? Because what I've learned throughout the process is just buying a house doesn't necessarily mean it's an asset if it's costing you too much, if it, starts to become something where you're not seeing any appreciation. So there's some people that think just because they're in a house and they're paying a mortgage that they have an asset, but there's no telling if they're going to be able to sell the house for more. There's just no predicting the future. So can you just clearly define for our listeners what exactly is an asset so they know exactly what they should be investing in?
Well, I'll say two things. Before I answer the question, I'll say about real estate. If you're renting a property, it's not that you don't have any real estate. You're actually negative the real estate market because you don't even own the place you live. If you own the place you live, you're neutral real estate, and you're only owning real estate as an asset if you have your place you live in and an investment property. What you said is very true, though. I bought a condo in 2004 in Chicago, and I still have it today. I rent it out. 20 years later, it's barely worth more than I bought it for because in that area, it hasn't really appreciated very much in that area of Chicago. There's other areas in Chicago in that same period that have gone up 400%. So and I knew when I bought it going in, I knew it wasn't the best place to invest because it was the highest price per square foot in Chicago. I just wanted to live there. And I lived there for, over 10 years. So I don't regret it or anything. But like you said, it's very important to know what you're getting yourself into. Number one, the place you live in, is it in an area where there's been historic appreciation? Is it, like that example in Chicago? Am I buying the most expensive price per square foot? Where, if you pay $320 for a 1-bedroom condo in Chicago, it's probably worth $340 now, maybe. 20 years later, it's not really going to go up too much. But that same condo would have been 100,000 in a different area of Chicago, and it's now worth 250. So like knowing kind of what you're buying is one thing. The other thing is, like you said, if I bought a house as a single guy with money, if I bought a huge house with a $5,000 payment and I didn't need the space, yes, it's an asset, but it's also a big liability because I have this huge payment. But so that's kind of just a caveat on real estate. But I think an asset is anything that over time historically goes up. So we can say, precious art. There's a huge market in secondhand Rolexes that have been doing really well. Stocks is the big one. Stocks, traditionally real estate does go up, and things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, things like that. So they're all what I would consider assets. Some are more stable and safe, some are more volatile, like even just in one area. So for instance, in real estate, you have very safe, stable real estate, then you have more speculative real estate. In stocks, you have the tech stocks, which are very volatile. You have very stable dividend paying stocks. So within each bucket, you have more safer things to invest, and then you have the more volatile upside, where you can have, you have more upside, but you also have the more potential of a drawdown. So I think that's the other thing with investing is we have to find what we're comfortable with. And traditionally, they say when you're young, go for the high risk investments because you have time for it to play out. If you're coming up to retirement, you want to be in very, very safe assets because you might, you're going to retire in 2 years and you need the money to live. So it's just trying to get that financial literacy. And listen, I've spent a lifetime in finance and I still learn every day, that there's different opportunities. There's different ways of seeing things. I love looking at it like, if you price the S&P index in terms of the US dollar, it looks like it's done very well the last few years. But if you price it in terms of Bitcoin, it's actually gone down because Bitcoin's gone up so much, and Bitcoin, some say it's kind of the reserve currency of the world. So this isn't a Bitcoin podcast. I'm just kind of giving you the example of that was I never even thought about it, but it's a different way of looking at things. Like, okay, why we were pricing it in the US dollar, but in the last 4 years, they've added 40% to the US dollar supply. That's why we're seeing all this inflation, because suddenly all this money has to go somewhere. So everything gets more expensive. So it's just trying to learn this stuff, trying to get your head around these different concepts. I think is such a useful thing.
Yeah, and well, the reason I wanted to bring that question up is because, when you do buy a house, again, let's use the example, even if you are married with someone and you buy a house and the payments are there, there's the factor of most likely you guys are going to have kids. You're going to want to start a family, and then the kid in itself is going to cost, I don't have to tell you that, but the kid in itself is going to cost quite a bit of money, and you're going to want to have things
Yes.
saved as you plan for that. And if the younger and younger you can get a hold of just the concept and the understanding of these things, the better off you're going to be. So, when it comes
Yes.
to, let's say, a middle school kid or even a kid that's in high school that has the whole world ahead of them and just has all the opportunities in the world, what sort of things do would imply or would encourage them to do as young people? You had the opportunity to have a father that put you on with certain things. Where would you say that they start in terms of as they're coming up in the world, they're knowing that, look, the life isn't going any slower. It's going fast. That's why it's called the Move Swiftly podcast, because it moves very fast. What sort of things can they be doing to get prepared for adulting, quote unquote?
Mm. I think managing balancing your budget is huge. Like living within your means. And a lot of people, they have side jobs and things like, if you live in a home and you don't have much expenses and you're a
Yeah.
teenager and you can have a little side hustle, sure, use half of it to have fun with your friends and go out, but invest the other half, get like a very stable S&P fund or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Or even, Bitcoin's volatile, but you probably do very well. Just put a little bit in, get a Coinbase account, put a bit in Bitcoin, just do something, and it'll give you so much freedom. And I'll give you a perfect example. When I graduated, I had 6 weeks between graduation and starting my first full-time job. I
Right.
spent 6 weeks traveling across Thailand, and I had a great time
Okay.
because I had money. I'd been working since I was young. I had money. My brother had got this opportunity to teach English in Russia, and he had no money. I paid for him, because
Wow.
he
Okay.
didn't have the money, and it gives it. So it just gives you, as a young person, it
Yeah.
gives you these awesome options to do these great things,
Yeah.
by having a bit of delayed gratification. So I
Yeah.
would say, and also just, man, I think it makes you, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, but
Mhm.
I think just working in kind of crappy jobs when you're young, because you don't have much skills, so you have to take what you get. I
Mhm.
think it gives you much more appreciation for just the cost of things, and it makes you much more, if you have, I didn't grow up with rich parents, but I feel bad for kids that do, because they get all these things and they don't appreciate it. Whereas
Yeah.
for me, I've been working since I was probably 12 years old. So I really have an appreciation when I buy something, because I can link in my head, okay, I had to sacrifice to work at this job that was kind of annoying and painstaking, save the money and then buy it. And it gives you way more satisfaction than if I just turned 16 and my dad got me a BMW.
Yeah, and I like you, I started, folding towels, wiping down treadmills in the fitness world, cleaning locker rooms, the whole nine. And the one thing that I still to this day kick myself with is I used to wear a lot of fitted, so I'd go to Lids and buy a hat. I'd buy a bunch of shit that don't mean nothing after you buy it. And this is why now, again, I appreciate the working aspect, but I look at my former self and I say, man, you didn't need to go to the club that night. You really didn't need to go party that night. You could have just saved your cash and think about it. But again, it's exposing them to this kinds of things, because the willingness to work is there. And the willingness to work is important, because there's a lot of people out there that don't show up for practice, don't have a sports background when it comes to just being there. But the just teaching them, hey, bro, you don't really got to go to the club tonight. You don't know nobody. I mean, you young, you're not really that dude. If you're not really that guy in the club that really is, popping bottles and making it rain, you just another dude. All right? So
Yeah.
save your money, think about where you want to invest, and maybe put it in something that you know is going to bring money back. And just giving them those little tips, I think is incredibly, incredibly important. So,
And can I just add to that? Can I add that
yeah,
we live in a world, of where people spend $75 to rent something, to take a photo in front of it and pretend it's theirs. We live
yeah,
in such a superficial world
yeah.
where everyone's
Couldn't
pretending
imagine.
to be someone they're not.
Right.
And so don't get caught up in that world.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful saying by Naval Ravikant. He was one of the early Bitcoin investors. He's very successful, like Silicon Valley entrepreneur. And he says
Yeah.
the three most important things in life can't be bought with money, and that's a calm mind, a fit body, and a loving family. And I think
Yes.
just that's such great advice to focus on people. Listen, money's great. I enjoy taking nice trips, and I live on 8 acres, so money can buy great things, but at
Yes.
the same time, if you're not happy when you're broke, you're not going to be happy when you're wealthy. So just try to get the most important things in life in order first.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. That is important. my mom teaches my niece something called the three B's: your brains, your body, and your bank account. And she's getting into her high school years, and she recites that: brains, body, bank account. You want them things just pumping, because, and then I'm glad you mentioned the body aspect too, because that leads to the confidence. There is a correlation
Yes.
between the way your body works and the way your bank account is going to look. I'm just telling you guys the facts. All right. You got to make sure you're on a regular workout routine. So, with all that, I do want to be very respectful of your time. Can you kind of tell people what's next, what's coming down the pipeline, and, how to get in touch with you and all that good stuff?
Well, thank you. It was such a pleasure. And I just want to piggyback what you said. The best advice for anybody is to get a daily habit of exercise and have that till the day you die. Like I hope to do some form of exercise every day of my life. And that's the most important thing. You're not going to have a healthy mind. You're not going to have a good mindset. You're not going to be optimistic if you're not looking after your body. So that's one thing. I see so many intellectuals where they overuse the brain and at the expense of their body, and they're not healthy, and then it causes all these issues. So that's a huge thing. I just think that's I'm so glad that you emphasized that.
So what do you do now for workouts? Now that are you not
So
fighting, you're not actually fighting people, so or
no, I still teach and train in
teaching,
jiu-jitsu. I still work out with weights. I still run. I do something every day, sometimes twice a day. I just think it's so important. And it doesn't have to be a long, it can be a 20-minute run. It can be 20 minutes at the gym. Just, fit it in when you can. But I just think getting that daily habit in is so, so important. There's almost a lot of people, like Gary Vee is a great example. He talks about, and he's getting into fitness now. He's in his mid 40s or late 40s. And he says, I wish I'd done this when I was younger, because I was just so unhappy. I did everything at the expense of business, and I let my body go to waste. So I think that's it's such a good habit to get when you're young, and just keep it forever. And that's another thing I got to be grateful to my dad. He just used to work out every day, and it was just I just saw him doing it, and I was like, oh, this is something you do.
part of it. Exactly. That's the way my
Yeah.
mom was. That's how I got into fitness. She'd wake me up every single. Now she used the fact that I wanted to play in the NFL. She used that as a way of getting me to work out and all that. But once I was done playing, I just couldn't live without. I needed it, man. I still compete. I do a lot of training for a marathon now, but I do a lot of
Oh, that's
5Ks,
awesome.
10Ks, and halves and all that stuff. And when you get around, and another point actually is when you get around those like-minded people, what they do for you in terms of just your goal setting and wanting to beat them. Because I'm so many 5Ks I run in, and you're trying to beat the guy. They look at me, that male ego starts kicking in, and you
Yeah.
start wondering, what the age group.
Yes.
Now you're always gonna shake it up at the end, but that just competitive juice, it gets you ready for your business and all that stuff. So
Well, yeah, I love that. We're very blessed, and I really like the fact that you brought up your parents' influence, and I did the same thing, because we are really lucky to have people like that, and I think we have to pay it forward by spreading that message. So some people, if you don't have a parent that's instilling these good lessons, listen to you. So I think that's really, really good.
exactly. It's our obligation, because I teach now, man, and I've coached high school for 2 years. I've seen so many kids without that, and it's actually the eye opener. It really is. It to know, because I think you had alluded to it. You don't know how good you have it until you start to
Yes.
see some of the ways that other people grew up, and that's the norm for them. The norm for them is to be assholes. The norm for them is to go and pay rent somewhere. I have a cousin actually who didn't grow up with what I had, and she went and rented a house and just left. Didn't pay the fee, just left, and they give you a credit score and all that. So that just is going to ruin you. So, we got to be thankful for the people that we have in our corner and all that good stuff. And you are actually from what I've heard, you're doing it for your son now. And, just keep doing it, man. It's helping somebody. Just know that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, listen, anyone that's listening, shoot me a message. My name's Lawrence Dunning on Instagram or LinkedIn, and I'm going to send 10 copies of this book about financial knowledge.
Okay.
I just want to keep spreading the knowledge as one. And I really appreciate being on your show and just talking about this stuff, because if the only thing people get from this is, okay, I'm gonna commit to learning a bit more about money, then they're gonna do very well, because it's just such an important thing to learn at a young age. Like you said, trying to be responsible with your credit when you're young, it's going to set you up for the rest of your life. But these are you don't learn this in school, so
No,
that's why it's so beautiful. There's people like you spreading this message to people.
Yes. All right, cool. So, first of all, appreciate the free book. So make sure you guys shoot that message. Now it is, where do they send it? Lawrence.
Oh, yeah, shoot me a message either on LinkedIn or in Instagram, and it's just Lawrence Dunning. And shoot me a DM, and I'll with your name and address, and I'll send you a copy.
Well, there you go. Appreciate that. All that will be included in the show notes as well. So final thing I do to close out all the shows, Lawrence, is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You have officially come back from fighting. You realize trading is not what it used to be. You got to kind of reinvent yourself. You're at a crossroads. I want you to pretend that that version of Lawrence has come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Mhm.
Um, I will say, while things seem bleak today, I know it's hard to believe, but this could be the best thing that ever happens to you. Because when you look back at this in many years, it's going to force you to grow and reinvent yourself. And that's what life's about. And so at the time, I went through a bit of a dark period, but it's crazy when I look back 10 years later, I'm so thankful that happened because I grew so much as a person. And we shouldn't shy away from challenges in life. You know, we should always look to embrace them. And that was just a good example in my own life. So thank you for bringing me back there. You bring back some memories, and it was a little difficult time. But anyone that's in a really bad time in your life, I know it's hard to believe, but I promise you, if you just keep going one day at a time, just trying to keep getting out of your hole, one day you will look back at this and you'll be grateful it happened. And I know it seems crazy, but I really do believe that.
Absolutely, man. Listen, it's the #1 show on innovative teamwork for a reason. All right. Fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.